Welcome to another episode of Skeleton Crew, the podcast where we discuss key crew positions for any filmmaking set. My name is Mark Farag.
And I'm Joseph Boyle, and today we're going to be talking with Joe Boccia, who is a sort of all-around filmmaker, does a lot of things, but we're going to be focusing more on visual effects. So what would you call yourself, Joe?
Kind of a visual effects generalist. Dip my toes in multiple ponds.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on and talking with us.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be here.
Yeah, certainly. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Joe. We're here in Central Florida in the Tampa area, but tell us a little bit about your background and maybe how you got interested in filmmaking a little bit.
Well, I got interested in filmmaking when I was pretty young. My dad introduced me to the movie Aliens. That's what kind of sparked it. I kind of became a bit of a movie nut after that. Just watched everything, consumed as much as I could. From there, I just made my own stuff as a kid. And I think at first I thought everything was made from like a book. So I was like, I wanted to be a writer. And that I'm not a writer. It's very bad writer. And then realized that it doesn't have to be like that, and went into more or less visual storytelling from there. I went to college as my major was web design, and while I was there, they started a film program, and I immediately switched over, and from there I got into advertising and do a lot of passion projects though that can be considered narrative and whatnot like that. So
sure. What was your experience like at film school? Did you have a good experience? Would you recommend that people go? Do you feel like it helped?
My experience, it was good, but at the cost, it really it better have been good. I don't think that it is, especially in today's day and age, by any means necessary. The skills required for, I think, almost any part of filmmaking can be acquired through, hard work, YouTube, online learning, okay? There's no real need to go to film school. The only reason I would say that a person should go to film school is if they have, unfortunately, like a lack of self-discipline to educate themselves. If they, and it's not a bad thing, some people definitely benefit from, going to a class at a scheduled time. You have to be there and then have accountability to finish projects and work because they, need the grade or whatever. And to be with other like-minded individuals who are pursuing exactly the same thing. Some people need that, and honestly, at the time when I went, I probably needed it too, because I'm not very self-disciplined. But
it's like the Army. It's like boot camp of filmmaking.
Yeah. But I mean, is it necessary? Do you have to go to? I personally don't believe so, especially now. There's so many things that are available online at such a lower cost, and they're being taught by people who are like rock stars in their field. It's not. I mean, you can go on to masterclass and take a class from Martin Scorsese. That didn't exist when I went to film school. I mean, what can you say about that? I mean, it's like
there seems to be like two camps of people who leave film school. Some of them have great connections afterwards and they're able to enter the industry. And then some of them seem to become pharmacists or something completely unrelated to what, nothing against pharmacists. It's a great job, but it's just not what they originally envisioned.
Actually, that's a good point. There are definitely some film schools where you meet the people to further your career, it depends on time. You can garner those contacts by getting into industry as, a PA and then working your way up over probably decades. Or you could, go to NYU for 4 years and one of your instructors might be, Martin Scorsese or something like that, and you're going to get those contacts a lot quicker. That is true. But if you're going to do that, you probably got to go to an NYU or a USC. You're not going to get it at the International Academy of Design and Technology.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. So I guess there's different reasons you go to different film schools.
Yeah.
So
it's not necessarily a bad thing. I just personally think in most cases it's an overpriced thing nowadays.
Yeah.
Thank God for YouTube. Things have changed. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I know you kind of
No.
I know you like competition, or we're laughing because we've discussed this in the past. I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I feel like it could be complicated because, too many people claim to be filmmakers, or the gear becomes democratized and much more affordable, and you have so many people like saturating the market, and that becomes hard to stand out. But that maybe is encouragement or reason enough to try to push forward with your storytelling rather than technical things. So,
well, it's just my whole thought. I think it's good to have information out there where people can learn, but I think experience is a different animal. And in my mind, it's much more preferable because you start to develop your own sort of views. So I'm fine. I'm happy to learn things about lighting or technical things, but I'm personally much more hesitant to listen to a director or something like teach me or tell me how I should do
the philosophy
things.
of directing.
Yeah, exactly.
I can appreciate that. I agree.
Yeah, but I think it just depends on who you are and how you want to go forward and such. So
I mean, it's actually, like you're right. It's the individual's approach to it. Like for example, I mean, I actually did I haven't finished it, but the Martin Scorsese one. There was just a lot of stuff on there. I was like, yeah, that's great, Marty, but I'm a guy in St. Pete, dude. I don't have a crew, all right? And I dig that, it has to be, you do it this way, but I mean, yeah, it's not, it's important to definitely take everything, I think, with a grain of salt. I do love studying the way other people do things. However, I learned my lesson kind of early on that there is definitely no one way. Or actually, did I just say a double negative? There's not a one way.
No, there's definitely not a one way. Okay, not one way. Yeah.
And I remember for me, like writing, as I said earlier, is definitely not my forte. And I've wanted to do some projects where I'd have to conceive it from the beginning. So I'd have to write it. And because I had such trouble writing, I studied my favorite screenwriters, and what I found is all of them did everything like galactically different, I love Tarantino's movies. Tarantino, he sits and he'll write stuff in a comp book so he can get it down fast. And then Jeff Nichols is another guy where I loved his writing, and he actually just writes scenes on index cards over time, and then he'll take all the index cards and kind of put them on the floor, and he basically will craft a story based on these scenes that he wrote. And he also moves completely in like a chronological order where the story has to take place in kind of a real time of like a week or two or something like that. And I was like, wow, maybe I should try that. That didn't work for me. The funny thing was actually writing in a comp book actually helped me a lot because I would usually sit in front of a laptop and it was too slow. Yeah. So but that doesn't mean I write like Tarantino, but I took that one little nugget that I learned from him, just longhand it in a comp book really just quickly.
So I think that,
that helped a lot,
But. Yeah, I think like you said, taking, you take little nuggets rather than, I think sometimes people when they're young have a tendency to maybe say like, how did they do it? Now I want to copy that, or I want to do that. Right. And like you said, the goal is to learn. Well, you got to learn to do it your own way, but you take little nuggets along the way. So that makes a lot of sense.
It's like there's no shame if you try to do it like the way that guy did it and it doesn't work out because that's the right way for him, not necessarily the right way for you.
You just don't. You realize all those things through experience.
Yeah, it all comes back to experience.
Yeah. No, that's good. So yeah, how do you choose what to? Because we talked about you do a lot of different things, and let's say within sort of the visual effects world or post-production effects, how do you choose? I'm gonna start to learn this or that. Whether to do like 3D modeling or more motion graphics, text, title design, or how have you over the years sort of chosen which topics to go into?
For me, it's just like, I kind of just get inspired by something I'll see. I'll be really dazzled by this piece or that piece or this shot or something like that. And if I get inspired by it and I also look at it and I can kind of maybe understand an inkling of how they did it, I'll be like, oh, okay, well, let me see if I can try to do that. Let's see if I can accomplish it. And if I can, I'll try to then use that technique in a way to create my own thing or apply it. Like if I get a project that comes in, whether it's like a passion project, somebody asked me for help on something that's just really cool, or it's a client thing. If it's something from one of those things I saw, I was like, oh, I can actually try to make that using this technique. Then I'll try to apply. But it's usually totally based on inspiration. I guess I'm trying to think of like an example. Raoul Marx is a title designer, and he's done a lot of work with Elastic, and they've done like every cool title sequences of the last like probably 5 years. Westworld, geez, there's like so many. He did a bunch of titles for like conferences, and conferences are always cool because they let you do whatever they want or whatever you want because they're paying you like nothing, if anything, just costs or something. And he did some really cool stuff, and a lot of it was all based on like just like models floating in space with cameras. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I can pull that off with Element 3D. And I couldn't pull off the quality that he had, but I could pull off all right, it looks pretty neat. And then I based the whole project on that. You know what I mean? And it was almost everything is from that. I get inspired by something to see if I can pull it off, and I use it for something different.
Yeah.
Well, walk us through like the process if a client or a filmmaker, a collaborator comes to you and says, I have this idea. Do you kind of bounce ideas back and forth? How much artistic license are you typically given? What's that whole process like?
Well, it definitely depends on the project. If it's like a client project where they're paying like, let's say, a full rate, it's more, for me, it's more of like, okay, what do you want? And I can accomplish this. It's very serving. I try to utilize all of my skills to give them what they want because they're paying for it. If it's something along the lines of like just something really cool for like, I do a lot of promos, and I use them as an excuse to do title sequences for like art shows that are like in downtown St. Pete. So, I'll find out a gallery is throwing an art show in 2 months, and they'll have anywhere between 25, 50 artists participating. If they haven't contacted me already and I'm interested in like the theme of the art show, I'll actually just hit them up and be like, hey, you guys want like a promo or something like that? And I'd say if I ask them 10 times out of 10, of course they'll say yes. Most of the time, I don't get any money from them. Sometimes though, there's some budget for something, and they'll actually give me money for costs. Like, and in most cases, like it'll be like 3D models or something like that. And I'll tell them, I was like, okay, you can give me nothing and I'll do what I can without spending any of my money. Or you can give me money and I can make it better. So what would you like? And they're like, oh, well, we got, whatever, a few $100. I'm like, okay, cool. I can buy some models for a few $100 and we'll make it a little bit better because I can work faster and so on and so forth. And in those, I have complete and total control over the project. I mean, and they're really cool about it because they're getting it for free. And I mean, I've taken their themes. Ooh, bless you.
Excuse me, sorry.
Bless you. I've taken their themes and even added like my own twist upon their theme. There was, and they've always been super cool about it. There was this one I did for Black Amethyst Tattoo in St. Pete. It's also a gallery. They did a 3-part show and it was called Legends, and it was all based on like fairy tales. Each artist was assigned like like Snow White would be one, or Peach Dragon another, and so on and so forth. And so I took that and I was like, okay, I want to take the fairy tales and infuse it with technology. So I did all these 3D models where I put like VR helmets on like Snow White, but there was like a tree and she was asleep, and then there was an apple that had digital glitches on it, and so on and so forth, to infuse something that I wanted to do along with their theme. And it works out. Everybody's happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So when you talk about like 3D models, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it, but like purchasing models, is this just like 3D like mesh characters or something? What is that?
Yeah, exactly that. There's like a bunch of websites that sell, like for example, for that, I bought, like I needed a really cool tree, and I did not want to just model a tree, Be honest, I don't even really know how to model a tree properly. Well, I bought a tree for like $10.
Okay, and it would take forever if you went and modeled it yourself.
I mean,
assuming.
even if it took me an hour, it would be just like for $10.
$10, yeah.
Give me a break,
Sure,
Yeah. But like, so I bought like the tree, and then let me see, like there was King Arthur was in one of the models, so I didn't want to model a sword. I found a sword.
All right. So
the
you're really
VR helmet
gathering the elements, and then you sort of put them all together.
Yeah, I'll like modify them, manipulate them to fit my theme from there. But they're pretty much made. I'll do like a lot of the texturing on my own because most of the time I don't use the textures that come with it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's basically that, just meshes of objects.
Yeah. Well, the first piece I saw of your work actually was a promo for the mixtape show, and I thought it was really good work. And I don't know if did you know Joe at that time?
Yeah, I think we worked on a 48-hour.
Yeah.
Before that. Yeah.
Okay, and then so I don't know how we probably became Facebook friends or something like that. But I saw that and I was really impressed with that. It was sort of an analog '80s looking feel with some different pieces. Tell us a little bit about a process like that, where there's you're shooting it and then you're editing as well, and how that works with a cinematographer and that type of thing.
Well, with that project, obviously the name of the show is Mixtape. And mixtape is naturally associated with like the '80s making your own mixtape, so that's where I took it. From there, I went out and bought like old receivers, like a lot of stuff that had '80s kind of like equalizers with the bouncing LED lights and stuff like that. And actually, originally our theme was to have we had built this like rack system that would have been from the '80s, right? And we were gonna have like a dancer dancing in front of it and stuff. But as things happen, scheduling conflicts and whatnot.
Sure.
We lost the dancer and everything. But so me and Javier Fick, who is the DP on that, he brought all his gear out, and we just basically shot the receivers and doing stuff. It was like, okay, so we shot like the tape rolling and the counter on the tape and all these like people from the '80s would recognize these things and stuff like that. And just to infuse the whole art aspect into it, we just poured paint all over everything. We just wrecked it all. At the end of it, we're like, okay, we're pretty much done with shooting this stuff where it has to work. All right, cool. And we just started squirting tons and tons of acrylic paint into like tape decks that are running and stuff like that, and came out pretty neat. And then
because I noticed those are part of the actual finished product. So was it sort of like, well, let's just do this and then we'll see if it ends up, and it ended up looking good and you put it in?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, like a lot of that, we just basically shot coverage that we thought was cool. I didn't like storyboard it or anything like that. We're like, oh, we'll just get a bunch of, kind of B-roll. And we just basically blacked out everything else that would be in the background. We brought a smoke machine in and stuff like that, and kind of set up more or less what could be cool photographs. And we just, we shot video that would be a cool photograph. And Javi did a hell of a job, and then he was cool and hooked me up with the footage, and I cut it and then added the titles from there. And the titles had a very there were like fuchsia or hot pink. Yeah. So we just made it very 80s,
So when I watch something like this, it reads 80s to me immediately. But how do you sort out, do you look at a bunch of old ads and try to break it down and say, okay, obviously this is going on and there's a layer of, noise here, and then like how do you conceptualize how to make something look like that? Or do you go and find tutorials, or do you make it up yourself? What's it like?
Well, in that particular case, first of all, I pretty much grew up in I'm a 90s kid, I guess, like 90s high school and middle school, but like, my elementary school years were in the 80s, so I got to kind of live it for a little bit.
I'm an 80s kid too, so for a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So I lived a little bit of it. I had some experience in the matter. And then I did do, you know, so we did a lot of, me and Javi did some searching on like Pinterest and stuff like that to just kind of figure out like what our lighting scheme was kind of going to be, like a color palette, you know. We both agreed that like it was like a teal and kind of like a hot pink was the color scheme. And I mean, in the end, the lighting scheme was fairly simple. It was like, you know, we just gelled one light this way and one light this way with those two colors, and it worked pretty much across the board. But I mean, that was definitely birthed from the research that both Javi and I, we just sent each other like Pinterest mood board stuff. Oh, this would be cool. This would be cool.
Yeah.
You know, there's a particular shot in there where like we locked off the camera and the tapes, the cassette tape, it's on a cassette tape that's playing. And they just like on the beat just change like as the drum hit comes down. It's like the tape changes. And Javi found that somewhere and he was like, oh, I want to do this. So I was like, okay. So going to the flea market and I had to buy like a bunch of different cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And it was like we didn't want to do like stuff like, you know, bands. We wanted like the cassette tapes that you would make a mixtape out of. So it was like, all right, well, I got to find a Memorex. I got to find a Sony tape. I think Panasonic. There was Maxell.
Yeah, all the ones that were blank and you wrote on them.
Yeah,
Right,
with labels and everything. I found some at the flea market that like had labels on them with stuff written on them. So
that's great.
I had like a bag of them.
Yeah.
Old
That's
school.
cool. That's quite the process. Yeah. Just
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was
start to finish.
It was mostly in, you know, spare time, you know. But you know, it still did take like, I mean, I in spare time like a good couple of weeks of just garnering all this stuff, and then, you know, we threw it out.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, it was all gone, except for the graphic equalizer. I couldn't find one like at the flea market, so I actually bought one like brand new, and it was like, you know, back in the day when I really wanted one of these things were expensive, and I bought like a brand new one for like $50. And when we were done, I didn't wreck that, so I actually eBayed it, and I got like $30 back.
Oh, yeah, no, that's good.
Had to offset the cost.
Yeah, definitely.
Going on with other passion projects.
By the way, we'll put a link to that
Oh,
video
yeah.
so you can check it out below.
for sure, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so regarding other passion projects and narrative stuff, if a director came to you and said, hey, I want you to be my visual effects guy, what's the conversation you're going to have then between the director and, say, a DP as well? Like, what practical considerations need to be considered when you're shooting a shot, different plates, and practical versus visual effects and all that?
I think that the first discussion would probably be with the director to see exactly what they want, and then I'm gonna have to figure out exactly how and if actually I can do it, you know, because visual effects is like pretty broad, you know, and there are some stuff people like, hey, yeah, I want to do this, and I'd be like, yeah, that's not in my set of capabilities right now, you know. I mean, but if I can do it, and they like, I'll usually do like some sort of test and I'll send it to them, and they dig it. From there, I would say like we should probably have a conversation with the director and the DP at that point and be like, okay, if you want this, in order to get this, I kind of need it shot this way. And it's actually funny. I mean, I haven't had too many projects where I've been able to do that. And I'm wondering actually how it'll go when I actually have to do that, because I don't imagine DPs kind of like being told, hey, you know, like for example, like if there's something on a shot that like it depends heavily on being tracked, you know, it would really be nice if I don't have motion blur in that shot, which means I would go, hey, ask the DP, can you shoot it like, you know, a fast shutter, you know? And I'm kind of thinking that most DPs would be like, no, I'm not changing the shutter, you know? And honestly, I can't blame them. I really can't. But if it comes down to money, it's going to be, if I've got motion blur in a shot I got to track, then the computer's probably going to fail at tracking it at some point, which means I'm going to have to manually track it, which means more money. And then, or it's just so blurry and I can't do anything, then
The quality's going to suffer.
I just like, hey, well, I can't do anything with that shot. But I mean, at the same time, though, I mean, I definitely don't want to. I would never want to dictate to a DP how to shoot his stuff, you know. And they have every right to kind of be like, kind of like that.
Well, it's good to get ahead of these conversations. So when you're in post, or you know, there's not a nasty surprise for the DP or the director when they look at their footage and say, "Oh, how come this is the way it is? This isn't what I envisioned." So it's good to get in on the pre-production, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, and see, here's the thing. It's like for example, going back to the tracking thing, you know, no motion blur. I mean, I can actually add motion blur back in, but you can't take it away. And but also on the flip side for the DP, he might just not dig post motion blur added to his footage. I get that, but I don't know. I'm wondering what's going to happen the first time I actually have the opportunity for that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything? So you said sometimes there's a discussion where someone might say, "Oh, I want this," and you say, "At this point, I can't do that." Is there anything? Actually, right before the show, we were talking about phobias. Is there any like production phobia? Just like that kind of freaks me out. Some bit of post production nightmare, or anything like that freaks you out a little bit.
I mean, honestly, for me, I've done it, I deal with it, but it's not a post-production thing. I'm terrified of shooting. I like to shoot, don't get me wrong, but the day of, I'm like, oh, okay, what is going to go wrong? What is not going to happen the way I saw it? Stuff like that. As far as like in post, for the most part, if it's been pretty clear about what they're going to give me and what I have to give back, I'm not too scared about it. The only thing that I can say that does scare me is when the goalpost is moved after it's been agreed upon, which, I mean, you guys probably know it tends to happen more often than not. People change their mind. If it's not some sort of agreement that's in ink with like visual pictures and stuff like that. I wasn't thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, but you kind of agreed to it. But that's not what I was thinking about. I didn't know what you were thinking. I mean,
the way you said it made it seem like that's what you were thinking.
Exactly. So that is definitely frustrating. But at the same time, I don't know if I'd call it a phobia. I don't think anybody likes that.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I understand. Is there anything? I mean, you mentioned like title sequences that you like to do, and again, I did see when I first watched Westworld, I thought of you just because of the initial title sequence you did with the characters sort of floating in space and such. It reminded me of it. So I was like, I bet Joe could do that.
Thank you very much.
Or something like that. I mean, it was great. It was a great sequence. But is that sort of what's your ideal role, in post-production or visual effects?
Actually, I like my pipe dream would be to be doing what Raoul Marx does, and that's like conceiving title sequences in like a 3D environment of some sort for either TV or film. That's like, if I get there, man, I don't know what my next goal would really be at this point. I think I'd be pretty happy if I got there.
Sure.
Right now, I mean, that's a tall order. Those guys are, rock stars of the industry. If I were to get to a point to where I could so much as help on something like that, that would be like, the next goal underneath the first one,
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I mean, I still love that stuff. And so I basically just use any excuse I can make to do one like that. That's why I do like the art shows. That's my excuse to kind of make my own title sequence of something. It's got names and it's got to be a couple minutes long and it's got a theme. So I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of like a title sequence. Let's see if we can make it work. And they're really happy with it. The one you're talking about, though, that was actually just a fake title sequence for a show that doesn't exist. I just wanted to see if I could make it work. I had the idea for like the kind of floating bodies for like some sort of post-apocalyptic TV show. So I was like, oh, I'll just see if I can make it work. And I made that, and it was cool. I picked my own cast members. I probably spent like a day just thinking, okay, if I was making this show, if I was the showrunner, who would I cast for this? Okay, so who's walking through the door? Okay, Jessica Chastain would definitely be in this. You know what I mean? Like another one too. I think that the leads for that show were Oscar Isaac and Amy. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I think it's Siemens, Seimemetz.
What's she been in?
She was in Upstream Color. She's from St. Petersburg.
Really?
Yeah. Ryan Zara, a buddy of mine, saw her at the Emerald downtown.
All right.
And dude, she's like an amazing actress, and like in my mind, tremendously underrated. You know, she was actually in Alien Covenant.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So she's definitely, moving up into like, some mainstream Hollywood stuff, but she's a great actress. She's a director, and she's from this town. I was like, and when I saw her in Upstream Color, I was like, damn, man. I'm like, she's got some chops, dude.
I still haven't seen that film.
Oh, it's pretty interesting.
Are you guys into Shane Carruth?
Yeah, I was gonna say he did that, and
I've seen Primer, which I enjoyed.
Yeah,
but
we're actually using. Well, he shot not to get too technical, but he
Yeah.
shot
GH4, hack GH4.
Yeah, hack GH4. It's one of our cameras today. We're using here for this.
An Upstream Color? That was a GH2. wasn't it?
No, it was a Primer. Maybe it was like a GH2.
No,
One of the
Primer
GH
was
cameras.
16 millimeter, but
Okay, that's right.
So-
He hacked one of the cameras and
Yeah.
he got quite a bit out of it. So yeah, he seems like an interesting fellow. I got to check out more of his work.
Dude, I've like listened to every interview I could of him. I love that guy's work. He's actually in my fake title sequence too, as like the director
I
or
did
something
notice
like that.
yeah, 'cause I just watched it before this. I wanted to go catch up on it, so I noticed that.
Well, speaking of like progressions and kind of referencing these other filmmakers and this other visual effects artist, what was his name again? The Westworld guy,
Raoul Marx.
Yeah. So one thing we're always trying to figure out is how to kind of advance ourselves and go to the next level. You created the spec piece, for instance, which was great. Are you trying to like take this now and send it off to different agencies or companies and say like, hey, this is what I can do? Do you want me to create a real piece? Like, kind of what's the goal for filmmakers, or what's the way to get there? I know it's a big question. There's not any one way.
Honestly, I just did the spec thing. Honestly, for myself, I didn't send it really anywhere. I did send it to Amy Siemens's like Facebook. I messaged her to be like, "Hey, just so you know, I put you in my fake show." She didn't get back to me. But yeah, I just did that for myself. As far as like trying to spread work around and to get into like certain facets of the industry, I gotta be honest. I've found kind of many difficulties trying to spread work around. I think we're definitely in a time where it's like it's really flooded. So if you really want to stand out, I mean, you have to do something like unbelievably wholly original that like has not been seen, or is just a really new take on something that has in a really special way. Yeah, it's really tough to kind of get. I hate to use it, like noticed nowadays. I mean,
How does that affect you, like mentally? I mean, do you put a lot of stock into, you put a lot of time into your projects and everything. Sometimes you just post and it's like, all right, well, nobody ever see that again. Does that affect you? Or are you just like, come on, I want to make it out there? Or how do you gauge success?
As far as gauging success on like my stuff, I only really tried to push one of my projects like I was like, okay, this is the one I'm gonna try. I sent it off to like blogs and websites and stuff like that were like more or less like if you get on their page, you will probably receive calls within a month asking you for work that's like out of state or maybe big work or Hollywood work or something like that. I sent all my stuff out on this one piece, and I didn't get that much back, but I mean, I guess I would say at the time I was probably a little bit disappointed, but as time has gone on, I look back at that, it's healthy in a way. It might be disappointing, but it's healthy because probably more important than a lot of other things is to know where you are in the food chain. And having delusions of being higher in the food chain of things in your industry is really dangerous. I would rather know where I am and be fine right there than to think I'm way higher and have people just going, what does this guy think he's even doing here? So as far as success goes, I don't know. There's definitely different ways. I guess the greatest success for me would just be doing something I like and hopefully getting compensated in a way that, you know, just is enough to provide for my family. I'm not looking for riches or anything like that. I'm not even looking for like major popularity, you know? I mean, if people look at my stuff and they like it, and, you know, it makes my day if I get like somebody says, "Hey, I really like that, dude." Honestly, like just you guys asking me to be here kind of like made my month. I was like, "Wow, somebody actually wants to talk to me about my stuff." Okay, cool, yeah. Thank you. You know, it'll probably get me through the next project when I'm like ready to, you know, just like give it up. Be like, "Oh, you know, Mark and Joe liked my stuff. They'll like this one." Yeah. So I mean, I guess I would grade success like I feel. Quite successful at this moment.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Joe? How would you?
Oh my
how would you
gosh.
measure success? Let's turn it around on you. I know I'm gonna get it back to you, and I regret asking already.
Yeah. Well, I think your point about knowing where you're at in the food chain is important, and constant humility, I think, is important. And I think assessing your own work objectively is important. You know, knowing what you believe about your own work, and hopefully that it's honest and that you're not fooling yourself is important. And then actually being satisfied with the work that you do. I think that's an element of success. Obviously, there's all these different types of successes that you want to come together. Where you said, you know, you can provide for your family, you can provide for yourself, and you can do work that's good, and other people can see it. And there's all these things that you want to come together. But much of the time I have to comfort myself and just say, I hope that I do something that's satisfying to myself, because there's honestly a good possibility that it's never going to go beyond that, you know? So I think that's sort of the ideal view of it.
I honestly think it's actually quite important to find a friend, you know, that you can give your stuff to that won't have a second's hesitation in telling you that it's awful and it sucks. Because if you notice, everybody, for the most part, most people, they'll, "Oh yeah, it's really good." You know, they don't want to hurt your feelings. That's nice and all, but I have a.
It's terrible. It's awful.
It's not just that. It's dangerous.
I have a couple of friends, man, that I can send something off to, and I know that like if I screwed up or if it's just bad or something, like they will tell me. And they're saving my ass a lot of the time.
I had a good friend. He was a really close friend through college, and then we sort of had a falling out. And after that, we've kept in touch, you know, from time to time. And I sent him a copy of a film. This was probably 5-6 years ago now. And he wrote me a handwritten letter that was 4 pages long in red ink, telling me how bad it was in various parts, and there was just no shame, no holding back, and that was probably the most helpful critique I've ever got. You know, so I wasn't, you know, hurt by it. I've always asked people far more for criticism. Please criticize my work, and I think, like you said, that's the most helpful, really. Because especially if someone just says it's good, I'm like, well. I mean, if you really do think it's good, then I'm interested in more details. Like, what's good about it?
Exactly.
Why is it good? Does it make you feel anything? Those types of things. What about you, Mark?
I would probably measure it based off of a timeline in my editor. Back in my editing days, I still do it from time to time. If I have a color system where my good clips are mango. So if I had a lot of mango, I was like, damn, this is a good one. I was like, this is a good editing day. This is a good shot. And every once in a while, I'd have like 3 or 4 mango clips on a timeline. I'm like, oh, yeah. No, but in all seriousness.
I've adopted your mango.
Yeah? Oh, it's a good color. It just jumps out at you. I love it. I mean, the stock, what's the stock color in Premiere? Like green or blue or something? Or it's not nearly as exciting.
Oh, it's indigo.
Oh, it's indigo? It's been a while.
I changed all my colors in my editor. Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Do you have any unique? Do you name the colors or anything?
You can name them?
Yeah, my titles are named Angry Red. And I just picked the most severe red, so I know on my timeline.
Oh, I didn't know you could name them. That's awesome. I picked basically the most saturated versions of the colors that they kind of offer you. So like you said, I've got a red that's like piercing, you know, and then I got like white. White is like it's like whiter than the white when you highlight it, you know. And everything sticks out. All the colors that like are preset in the editor, they're just so like desaturated and plain. And it's like, if I need this like little sliver of a clip and like 3 hours of footage to stick out, it needs to be like bright red.
That's right. That's right. That's success right there. No,
That's success. Mango clips. Many mangoes.
I think, in all seriousness, though, I would say, just kind of like echoing what you two were saying, the idea of it being authentic and feeling just genuine to who you are. You can make something that's great, that you know it to be great, perhaps, if you're not delusional at least. But then if it's perceived poorly, it's easy to think it's garbage, which happens quite often. But if you can look back in yourself and say, this is truly representative of who I am and my vision, I think that's something to be proud of. And then if it's memorable too, like outside of yourself, I've seen so many things that I forget after tomorrow, but I read a poem or I watch a short film and I've remembered it years later. So I think that's important to gauge success.
Yeah, that's good. Joey, we were just talking before the show about a short film that we'd watched and how it stuck with you. You had suggested it stuck with me for a few days, and I sort of kept coming back to it in my mind. And so it's very similar to what you're saying. It comes back, and I haven't forgot about it. So I think that's sort of the mark of something that's better. Even if someone had made it and there's like 3 views on Vimeo or YouTube or something. So, Anyway, good. Success. Success.
Tackled that one in about 5 minutes. Not too bad.
Yeah, that's
Some
good.
people spend their whole life trying to define that one.
We should pretty much button it up. Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about like gear that you use, Joe. Are you a Mac or a PC guy?
He's baiting me. For those who don't know,
No.
there's a long-standing debate. No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, but like what type? You don't really have to answer that. You can if you want. But what type of gear is necessary for really intense renders and a lot of post-production work?
Well, if we could go back, like I don't know, maybe 8 years, 10 years, it'd probably be, for me, it would be Mac. But nowadays Mac is unfortunately not cutting it anymore. I'm currently in the process of gathering all my PC parts to switch over from Mac to PC. Now that being said, I'm not selling my Mac. I'm going to keep my iMac, but most of my work is going to be done on my PC. I do love the experience on Mac, and I love the stability of OS X and all that stuff, but
you just don't get the power though, because there's no question that Macs don't offer the firepower that PCs offer.
Especially
at an affordable price. Yeah.
Well, you can technically even argue that. For me, what I want to get into is 3D rendering, GPU 3D rendering, which means you just stack video cards. And obviously, every Mac person knows that you can't do that. You can add a video card with, like, they call them eGPUs now. They're like external. Mm-hmm. Each one will take up a Thunderbolt port, I want to stack 4 cards, that's going to be tough. Mm-hmm. Even with the Mac Pro, it's going to be expensive. So you got to buy a $3,000-$4,000 computer and then add $5,000 worth of cards on top of it. Or you can build a PC that's $5,000. That's probably got it all already, or maybe not $5,000, but it's still definitely be a few thousand underneath the Mac at this point.
Sure. So that makes sense. Depending on what you're doing, I'm totally with you. So.
If I was just doing After Effects and motion graphics in After Effects and not wanting to kind of go into 3D, I could probably stay in the Mac world. I could probably, the iMac Pro is a capable machine, even though I think it's pretty overpriced for what it is. Mm-hmm. I could probably get by with the regular iMac, just like a decked out regular iMac if I wanted to stay in After Effects. But if you want to go to 3D and you want to do these GPU renders like Octane or Redshift, you have to go PC. As a matter of fact, they only work with NVIDIA GPU cards. So
And Max moved away from those.
They
So
yeah.
used to, they used
I
to
have
them.
I have my current iMac at home is the last iMac that they offered an NVIDIA GPU, and I think it's 2013 or 2011. I don't know, but it's an older Mac. So yeah, it's not even offered. Like you can't get an iMac Pro with
Sure.
NVIDIA GPUs. So
Yeah, so you use like After Effects and what other programs are you using?
for post work, I mean, After Effects is definitely like the biggest workhorse, and then I have plugins and scripts that I use often.
What was it like learning After Effects? And when did you start learning that? Because I remember the first time I opened it, it was when I was pretty young. And
It's a terrifying program. It's
Yeah.
so daunting.
was
I still don't know
terrifying
what the hell to
immediately.
do. I can, yeah, it's keyframes. What awful things.
Oh,
I hate keyframes so much.
we talked about that before. Yeah. No, I remember it was the first program, though, that could actually play back slow motion with sound when I was really young. So I was really excited about that. But that was all I couldn't do anything. It was a terrifying program. That was my early on phobia. I can use it a little bit now, but
I got into After Effects for just wanting to play with like certain visual effects. Like when I was a kid, well, I wouldn't say I was a kid. I guess I was probably my late teens to early 20s. But like I wanted to add lightsaber blades to like a little lightsaber fight that me and my friend shot. After Effects was where you had to go for that. Back then, we actually had to like mask frame by frame the core of the blade and then just copy it and add the glow, and it was really painstaking. Now you can, it's literally a plugin. There's a plugin called Saber.
Oh, yeah.
And you literally put one point on where the blade like comes out at the hilt, and then one at the end, and then you just got a keyframe constantly where the blade starts and ends, and that is it. And
Really?
then you
Wow.
change the colors and everything else. It's all built into the plugin.
So this is a crazy question, but I realize I don't think this is going to be it. But so when I was younger, in my early teens, I would look around the internet for different, interesting videos and such, and I actually found a site called Jobo Visuals, or it was called Jobo. It was this guy who did work in After Effects. I doubt it's.
No, it's not the same one as mine.
It wasn't used. Okay, but this guy would make like lightsabers, and this was really early on before YouTube existed, like probably 10 years before YouTube existed or anything. But he would do things where he'd like freeze his girlfriend, and then he did like a karate kick, and she shattered into a thousand pieces. Oh man, I was so hoping it was you. That's so cool.
No, I probably downloaded and watched tutorials from that guy as well. I remember the first like lightsaber tutorial I didn't involve After Effects. It was actually Photoshop. You would take your video clip and bring it into Premiere, or I don't know, maybe you'd import it as what is called a film strip file in Photoshop, which was the resolution of whatever it was back then. It was probably 720 by 480, but it came in as a strip, literally like a film, just one frame after another, and the file was like huge.
I
It was
remember
a
doing those
huge
back in the day,
image.
yeah.
And you would just create a new layer like you would in Photoshop and start painting on your lightsaber blades one frame at a time. And then you had the ability to export it as, I guess, like an AVI or something after that. And it was like ridiculously brutal on the machines because it was such a huge image. Like the odds of you crashing were fairly good, and I did it many times in the middle of it. Yeah, something tells me that guy probably had a tutorial on that back then or something like
Yeah,
that.
it could have been. So I actually, looking back, I don't know if he did lightsabers. He might have, but anyway, that was going to be a cool story if all these years later I'm sitting there discussing. But yeah.
Yeah, in the world of visual effects, are there like competing philosophies about whether things should be done more by hand versus scripts and plugins? I know, like in the sound world, for instance, there are some old-time mixers who swear by like more analog technology versus more digital recorders and microphones and such. Do you kind of see that in your industry, or not so much?
Well, I can't really speak towards like the industry. I mean, for me personally, it's all about the result, and sometimes analog provides a better result than a fully digital solution, and sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. More often than not, I've found that it's actually The best result is actually like a little bit of a hybrid. I give you a great example. I had to do something recently, just a little test where I added fire to a football player, and the Saber plugin actually has like a fire preset. So like I set the number on fire, and like Lily had stripes on his shoulders. I set those on fire, and you just basically draw a mask around it and just rotoscope the mask to stay in that shape over the duration of the clip, and it has fire, but it definitely looked very digital. So I took some stock fire footage from like Video Copilot and threw it on in just little pieces there to kind of hide the digitalness of it, and added some real smoke, added some real embers. And I think that was the difference between it looking like just more or less horrendous and actually being like, oh, well, that's not bad. Like, I know that guy isn't on fire, but
It sold
it
though.
looks
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
you know?
So it's like using as a baseline maybe, and then sort of tweaking by hand.
Yeah. And that's definitely an example where, like, using both worked. As far as, like, the stigma in the industry, I just think, it depends on your result, and you can definitely see where some people, or I shouldn't say some people, maybe some houses or whatever, stuck to one or the other. And I think sometimes they probably paid for it a little bit. Some places, we do this all digital, and you're like, well, probably would have looked pretty good if you had maybe a model in there or something like that, like a real model. That's like another talk that happens a lot with special effects. Is like you look at like all the older movies from the 70s and 80s where they use actual models. Man, that stuff still looks good, And then you had like the whole 3D revolution in like the 90s and early 2000s where they just totally abandoned models, and basically the model building industry in Hollywood kind of just disappeared overnight. But that stuff didn't look as good. Now they're finally coming back where they're using just a little bit of both. Some stuff will be in models, some stuff will be, digital, or they'll throw a little bit of digital on top of the model. I almost want to say like Rogue One, actually, like a lot of this stuff in that. There's got to be some Star Destroyers in there that they shot, and it was a model, and then they added digital effects to it, and that looks great.
Yeah, I love the model stuff, and even in Star Wars and such, but then in Lord of the Rings and all that, they had huge models.
Oh yeah, they had some really great stuff in Lord of the Rings, and like you say, huge. It was like those castles were like 30 feet tall.
Yeah,
kind of
I think
stuff
they
like
called
that.
them bigatures. was the term they used. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic what they can do. Have you ever worked with models?
Not actually to shoot. I'm basically like a movie nerd, right? So when I get into like a movie I like or whatever, if it's got toys, I'll buy the toys. And like I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but like for example, let's just say Avatar, right? I thought the mech suits in Avatar were pretty cool, right? Now you can get a maquette of like that mech suit from like Sideshow Collectibles, and if I had to guess, it's probably somewhere between like $800 and $1,500, right? But it's cool, man. The thing's like got dried mud on it. It's got scratches on it. It's a perfect replica of like that mech suit. I don't have the disposable income to spend $1,500 on a maquette. To be honest, I was like, that's all. I could buy a camera for that. So what I do is actually I go get the toy, and I got the toy of the mech from Avatar, and I just repainted it. And that's like been a hobby of mine for like quite a few years now. I've gotten, not to toot my own horn, but I've gotten pretty good at it. I can make something look fairly realistic. I can make something look like steel or aluminum and scratched up and all that stuff. And so I just started painting my own toys. That's been my experience into modeling, like physical modeling. Now, that being said, I've actually really, really wanted to like create like a huge like spaceship, like a physical model, and shoot it and see if I could make it look really cool. Honestly, I haven't had the time. I know that if I do that, I got to make one that's going to be like, like 6 or 8 feet long. I don't have a garage, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
sure.
And my wife is not going to be cool with a 6-foot spaceship sitting in
your
the
living
den,
room.
you know what I mean? So, but it's definitely something I want to do. And I think once I have a garage or something like that, and I have some time, I'm going to make something like that to just shoot a little test and see if it looks cool. There's a lot of movies that have done that. I mean, that movie Moon.
Oh yeah.
Most of that stuff was all physical models, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
It looked
yeah.
really good. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't
I think
think of it as being fake or anything.
the only digital effects in regards to Moon was the harvesters that are picking up all the moon rock or whatever. As they're going, they're like spitting like dust and moon rock out the back. That was like particular.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Gotcha.
that's
yeah.
it. The actual they use like a little
Which
particle.
is like a plugin for
It's an
After
After
Effects,
Effects
right?
plugin that anybody can get. And that's, I think, all they use. They actually just shot this thing cruising along. They made the moon surface out of kitty litter.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love stuff like that.
It's great.
Just the most random.
How did somebody figure that out? You know, I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's gray and it's like, you know, rock, but like they went out and bought like tons and tons of kitty litter and put it on like a huge table and it's the moon.
Yeah.
It's crazy what people can come up with. The fountain, we have a poster of it here in the office. I remember the bubble scene and the space sequences. I think a lot of that came from bacteria or some type of microbes or something that were filmed under a microscope.
Really?
If I recall.
Dude, liquid dynamics, man. Oh, I studied that one too. That one and Tree of Life. Tree of Life. I want to say they actually had the same guy that did the work on the fountain come in for Tree of Life for the Earth
Yeah,
the
that's
birth of
great.
the universe sequence. And it's just like all these different chemical reactions shot with a phantom at high speed or shot at like, you know, super macro. I'm a big fan of that, and I've actually done. I did a title sequence, which was probably half of it was all just like liquid experiments and stuff. I started mixing model paint with like hydrogen peroxide and stuff like that just to see what would happen. Weird stuff happens. Too. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So where do you do these at? Are you said, you know, you just like, well, wife, you know, this is going to be out here for a while. And...
I actually, for that, I told her, I was like, listen, I'm going to be in my office for probably the entire weekend with this stuff. So I just prepared her and she was fine. I kept it all in my office. Basically what I did was I took it was a garage sale picture frame, right? So I forget how it was built, but it stood up off of the table, but it was glass. So I put black paper underneath it, so it was black, and then I had glass, and I just shined one light source onto the glass. And then the camera, I took a slider and just put on the tripod, I just pointed the camera straight down at it. And then I would just start, I had just stacks of model paint and chemicals and you name it, like canola oil and peroxide and milk. I had creamer, I had tons of that stuff. And then my daughter, like, you know, for kids, when you have to give them medicine, and, you know, they give you like a little syringe for like the ibuprofen. It's just like a little plastic tip. It's not like a metal syringe. So I took a bunch of those. We did not give them back to my daughter. But, you know, just like, you know, load up on canola oil and hydrogen peroxide and hit record on the camera and just kind of, you know, hope something cool happens. And half of the time it wasn't cool. It was actually really boring. But the other half, so you got some neat stuff, you know. I found out that like metallic paints and hydrogen peroxide like react. It was weird. They kind of just start bubbling up, and since the paint is metallic, you get all these like cool like little highlights and sparkles in it and everything. And it was definitely fun. And I actually want to do it again soon sometime. Just like make a pack of like all these reactions that, you know, whatever I can put online or something.
Yeah, sure. So it ended up in a sequence though. Was it?
Yeah. That was like. I think that was actually my first art show title sequence. No, I'm sorry, it was like my third. I did a couple before that, but that one was like, it was a lot of work. That one I worked on. I shot all that stuff. That was like an entire weekend, and then I had to cut it together, and it was difficult to cut because all it is just stuff there wasn't a rhyme or reason to it. So I had to figure out a way to kind of give it some rhyme and reason. So that edit was actually a little bit difficult for me. And then I did tons of like motion graphics on top of it. The piece ended up being something like, I want to say like 4 minutes long, which in motion graphics, that's a long running
long
time.
time,
You're
yeah.
animating everything. And then I had a lot of help from Eric Hunter. You guys know Eric, right?
Yeah, worked with him a
I've
couple of
never
times.
met
I
him,
think
yeah.
maybe 2 times. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, he's got his own thing going out in Texas, but he was here at the time. He's a good friend of mine, and he did the VO and he did all of the sound design on top of the music. And he actually got a friend of his named Amy to do the VO with him, and we actually had the VO go in and out from like a man's voice to a female's voice, and so on and so forth. Billy Mays donated one of his songs for the soundtrack. I mean, it was like I had a lot of people kind of help me out on that, and that was like a big project for me, one of my first like really big projects.
Cool.
But it was fun. I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, it sounds like quite a collaborative project and a lot of local people, right?
Oh yeah, it ended up being like a title sequence for an art show. So
Yeah, sure. Yeah, makes
That's
sense.
cool.
yeah.
What are you working on now, Joe? And where can people find your work at as well? We'll put some links down below to some of these videos we've been talking about. But
You can find all my work on my website, which is forgefilm.co, not .com. I think I'm gonna have to change that because a lot of people just intuitively type the M after that, but it's forgefilm.co.
okay,
And then as far as like right now, I'm just doing a lot of experiments, seeing what I can get away with in 3D and stuff, because I want to move to doing a lot of work in just totally 3D outside of like After Effects and Element 3D. So I've been doing tests and I'm working on building that PC and so on and so forth. So I'm in like a big transitional phase. I haven't done anything crazy like for passion projects lately, but I've had like a pretty big influx of client work and some actually cool client work. I can't talk about it yet because it's not released, but it was actually stuff that I was just like, oh, I'll spend extra time on this. I don't care if there's budgets because it's so cool. So that I've been really excited about. And yeah, hopefully pretty soon we'll get the PC done and get some crazy 3D stuff going with Octane. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
That's great.
Well, we appreciate you coming in, Joe. It's been great chatting with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, so everyone, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, share, subscribe on.
What's our website? We got Skeleton Crew
Oh yeah, Skeleton. You can go to skeletoncrewpodcast.com. That's just a simple website there, but you can find links. The microphone. You can find links to our podcast and our YouTube channel and everything there, and then leave a review on iTunes, and that helps us out.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes or description below. Music by Ian Kreider. To contact us, please visit skeletoncrewpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.